The city of Valeth rose like a jewel against the dark forest that hugged its walls. Towers of gray stone pierced the sky, and lanterns flickered along the cobblestone streets, casting shadows that danced like restless spirits. At the heart of the kingdom, whispers of a mysterious ruler filled the air, a king feared and respected, known only as the Alpha. Legends told that he could see through lies, bend loyalty with a glance, and that no enemy had ever crossed him and survived. Yet in the city, no one knew his face. On the morning of the new moon, the gates of Valeth opened to travelers, merchants, and wanderers. Among them was a young woman, her cloak dark and simple, her boots worn from the journey. Her eyes were sharp, bright with curiosity and a hidden strength. She carried little but a satchel filled with necessities, yet she walked with the grace of someone who belonged nowhere and everywhere. The guards at the gate watched her with suspicion, murmuring to each other about the strange air that seemed to follow her. One guard in particular watched more than necessary. He leaned casually against the stone archway, his posture relaxed, though every muscle beneath his cloak was alert. His dark hair fell in careless waves, and his eyes, deep and calculating, seemed to pierce through the crowd. He said little, but his gaze lingered on the girl as she approached the gate, noting her movements, her posture, the way she held herself as if the world was testing her at every step. The girl stopped at the guard post, offering the usual greetings and identification. "Name?" one of the other guards asked. "Leora," she replied, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "Purpose of visit?" "I seek entry into Valeth," she said simply. "I have business in the capital." The guards exchanged uncertain looks. There was nothing remarkable about her words, yet something in her eyes made them uneasy, as if she carried a spark that could not be hidden. The guard who had been watching from the shadows, the one who seemed almost out of place in the crowd, felt it too. A strange pull stirred in him, a mix of curiosity and something he had not felt in centuries. He studied her silently, noting the way she moved with confidence yet without arrogance, the way her hands hovered near her satchel, ready for defense if needed. There was an energy around her, subtle but undeniable, like the hum of magic just beyond perception. "Everything appears in order," the senior guard finally said, stamping her papers. "You may enter." Leora nodded politely and stepped forward. Her boots clicked against the stone as she passed through the gates. Behind her, the city opened like a labyrinth of possibilities, its streets alive with merchants calling their wares, children chasing each other through the alleys, and citizens hurrying about their daily tasks. The guard watched her go, his senses alert. He had seen thousands of travelers pass through the gates, yet something about her lingered in his mind. Perhaps it was the faint glow of determination in her eyes, or the way she seemed unafraid of the city's watchful gaze. Whatever it was, it tugged at him in a way that was both unnerving and irresistible. Hours passed. The day moved slowly, yet the guard remained at his post, his attention never straying far from the girl who had passed through. From his hidden vantage, he saw her pause by a fountain, watching the water ripple in the morning sun. She knelt briefly, cupping her hands to drink, her reflection caught in the clear surface. For a moment, she seemed like any ordinary traveler, yet the guard knew better. There was a strength beneath her calm, a light that refused to be dimmed by fear or hardship. Suddenly, a commotion arose near the city entrance. A figure, cloaked and hooded, moved swiftly toward the fountain where Leora stood. The other guards, distracted by their routine, did not notice until the figure had drawn a dagger. The air seemed to still, the city's sounds dimming as the shadow approached her. Without thinking, the guard stepped forward. In one fluid motion, he intercepted the attacker, catching the dagger by the hilt and twisting it from their grasp. The figure struggled, but the guard's strength was overwhelming. He moved with a grace that betrayed the skill of someone far more than a simple city watchman. Within moments, the threat was neutralized. Leora's eyes widened, both in fear and amazement. She had not expected anyone to intervene so quickly, and certainly not with such precision. Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. The guard said nothing, only nodded toward the city gates. "Go. You are safe now." Leora hesitated, studying him carefully. There was a familiarity in his eyes that she could not place, something ancient and commanding. Yet she found herself drawn to him despite the strangeness of the encounter. She gave a small, grateful nod and continued on her path, her curiosity about the mysterious guard growing with every step. The guard watched her disappear into the bustling streets of Velith, his heart unexpectedly unsettled. He had not felt such interest, such longing, in centuries. He had ruled kingdoms, defeated armies, and faced the deadliest of threats, yet this simple girl stirred a part of him that he had long thought buried. A flicker of doubt crossed his mind. Could one human truly change the course of his immortal existence? Night fell over the city, and the gates closed with a heavy clang. The guard returned to his post, though his thoughts remained on the girl he had watched and protected. The streets emptied, lanterns flickering like dying stars, and the city seemed to hold its breath. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of a wolf's howl echoed through the mountains, a reminder of the wild, untamed forces that still roamed beyond the walls. Inside the castle, whispers of the Alpha King's presence filled the air. Few had seen him in years, and rumors spread like wildfire. Some said he walked among the people in disguise, testing loyalty and observing his kingdom unseen. The guard who had protected Leora was no ordinary sentinel. Beneath the rough cloak and quiet demeanor, he was the Alpha King himself, watching and waiting, testing fate in the simplest of ways. And now, fate had placed the girl before him, unknowing, unafraid, and utterly captivating. The pull between them was undeniable, though neither understood its depth. The king knew that sooner or later, she would change everything, the balance of his kingdom, the path of his life, and perhaps the course of destiny itself. As the moon rose over Velith, silver light spilling across the rooftops, the king remained at the gate, invisible to the world yet fully aware of it. Somewhere beyond the walls, the girl walked through the streets, unaware of the eyes that followed her every step. In that quiet, charged space between watcher and wanderer, the first thread of a bond was woven, a bond that neither time, distance, nor danger could easily unravel. And in that moment, a whisper of wind carried a promise, one neither of them fully understood, that this meeting was no accident, that her presence in Velith was the beginning of a story that would shake kingdoms, challenge power, and awaken hearts long thought closed. The city slept, but the story had just begun. Cliffhanger. As Leora paused on a quiet street, a shadow detached itself from the alleyway, silent and intent. She felt it before she saw it, a cold presence that made her spine tingle. Before she could react, the shadow lunged, and from the darkness the guard who had watched her all day stepped forward with unmatched precision, intercepting the attack. His eyes met hers, and in that brief, electrifying moment she sensed that the man before her was no ordinary guardian, and her life had just changed forever. The city of Velith shimmered under the glow of 1,000 lanterns. Tonight was the Festival of Masks, a night when the streets came alive with music, laughter, and the delicate hum of magic. Citizens donned masks of gold, silver, and colored glass, hiding their identities while revealing truths that were usually kept secret. The air smelled of roasted chestnuts and candle wax, mixed with the faint scent of flowers carried on the breeze from the palace gardens. Leora walked cautiously through the crowded streets, her dark cloak hiding her modest dress beneath. She had heard of the festival before arriving in Velith, but the reality was far grander than she imagined. Children darted through the crowds, their laughter echoing off the stone walls. Merchants called out their wares, spices, silks, and strange trinkets from distant lands. Musicians played lutes and flutes while dancers twirled in rhythm to the beat of drums. Despite the celebration, Leora could feel a subtle tension in the air. She had passed through the city gates safely, but there was something about the festival, about the way people moved with hidden motives and whispered secrets, that made her senses sharper. She kept her hand near the strap of her satchel, where she carried a small dagger her father had given her for protection. High above the streets, hidden on a balcony, the Alpha King watched her. Though he no longer wore the simple guard's cloak, he kept himself disguised in a dark mask and ceremonial garb, blending seamlessly with the crowd. His eyes, however, never left her. He had observed her for days, and now, amidst the sea of strangers, she moved like a comet through the night, impossible to ignore, impossible to forget. The king noted the way she paused to help a merchant whose cart had overturned, lifting a basket of apples and handing them back with a warm smile. He saw her intervene when a drunk noble tried to harass a young girl, placing herself between them with courage that spoke of experience beyond her years. The people around her saw only kindness, but the king understood something deeper, a quiet strength that could not be measured by sword or title. As Leora moved deeper into the festival, she felt eyes upon her. At first she thought it was curiosity, perhaps simple admiration from strangers, but the feeling persisted, subtle and insistent like a pulse in the air. She turned her head briefly, scanning the crowd, and caught a glimpse of a man with dark hair and a commanding presence, partially hidden behind a mask and a pillar. Their eyes met for a heartbeat, and the world seemed to pause. He was watching her, but not with simple curiosity. There was intent, purpose, and something protective. Before she could process the encounter, a group of masked nobles approached her. Their smiles were polite, but their eyes were calculating. One, a tall man with a silver mask etched like a wolf, stepped forward. "Good evening, traveler," he said smoothly. "You are far from the roads of your home. Might we offer guidance, or perhaps companionship for the night?" Leora's fingers brushed the strap of her satchel. She could sense danger beneath the charm, though it was cloaked well. Her voice remained calm but firm. "Thank you, but I am fine," she said. "I have only come to see the festival." The nobles exchanged glances. The wolf-masked man's smile tightened and he stepped closer. Such pride. It can be dangerous for one so young. The night is full of surprises, and not all are kind. Before Leora could respond, a shadow passed behind the nobles. In a fluid, silent motion, the Alpha King stepped forward, positioning himself so that his presence was between her and the noble group. He did not speak, but the authority in his stance was unmistakable. The nobles felt it, their smiles faltering. Leora's heart skipped. The man from the balcony, her silent protector, had appeared without warning. His eyes met hers, and she felt both reassurance and an unfamiliar thrill. She nodded slightly, gratitude passing silently between them. The nobles, realizing their attempts were futile, moved on, murmuring threats that the king did not hear. He remained vigilant, his gaze tracking Leora as she continued through the festival. Music swelled in the courtyard of the palace, where performers twirled beneath arches of flowering vines. Leora found herself drawn to the stage, where dancers in flowing robes performed with grace that seemed almost magical. She paused, mesmerized by the fluidity of their movements. The Alpha King watched from a hidden vantage, noting the softness in her expression. Yet beneath it he saw the steel she carried, her awareness, her readiness, her courage. Few had walked through his city without fear, and fewer still had commanded his attention so completely. As the night deepened, the festival became more vibrant and more dangerous. In a dim alley, Leora caught sight of another shadow moving swiftly, almost too fast to see. Her instincts screamed at her, and she spun just in time to see a dagger flash in the lantern light. The Alpha King moved before anyone else could react. He intercepted the attacker with uncanny speed, twisting the dagger from their grasp and sending the assailant sprawling into the shadows. The crowd gasped, but most believed it was part of a performance, a clever trick of the festival. Leora's heart pounded. She looked at the masked man who had saved her again, and for the first time she spoke with raw emotion. Why are you helping me?" The king's voice was low, barely above a whisper, though it carried weight. "Because you should not fall tonight." The words were simple, but the meaning was heavy. There was more in his eyes than protection. There was recognition, as if he had seen her before, or as if fate itself had drawn him to her. Leora felt a shiver run down her spine. Something about this man was not ordinary, and yet she felt an unexpected trust. The festival continued around them, oblivious to the silent bond forming in the alley. Leora and the king moved away from the crowd, their steps careful, measured. Though they did not speak further, a conversation existed in their shared glances, a language of understanding that neither fully recognized, yet both felt. Minutes passed like hours. The king kept his eyes on her, scanning for any further danger, and Leora felt an unfamiliar comfort in his presence. She had traveled alone for so long, yet here was someone who seemed to see her fully, without judgment, without fear. As the festival reached its peak, the city square became a swirl of masks, colors, and laughter. Fireworks ignited the night sky, painting it in red, gold, and violet. Leora looked up, momentarily distracted by the beauty, and that's when she noticed a faint, shimmering glow rising from her own hands. Confused and frightened, she drew back, feeling the strange warmth pulse through her veins. She did not understand it, but the sensation was powerful, alive, and connected to something older than the festival, older than the city. The king, observing from the shadows, tensed. The glow was not ordinary. It was a sign, a ripple of magic that only a few could wield, and only under extraordinary circumstances. His mind raced. She was special, far more than she realized, and her arrival in Valeth was not a mere coincidence. "Stay close," he murmured to himself, almost reflexively. "Do not stray," but fate had other plans. Before he could reach her, the same nobles from earlier, now joined by masked accomplices, moved toward Leora again. Their intentions were clear. She was more than a simple visitor, and they sought to exploit her. The king stepped forward, this time without concealment. He moved like a shadow crossing the moonlight, precise and unstoppable. His cloak swirled around him, and in one fluid motion he intercepted the lead noble, disarming him and sending the others scattering. The crowd watched in awe, believing it part of the performance. Yet the electricity between the king and Leora was unmistakable. For the first time, Leora saw him fully, the Alpha King, unmasked, powerful, and undeniable. Her breath caught and her heart raced as she realized the truth. The man who had been guarding her all this time was no ordinary sentinel. You are the king," she whispered, awe and fear mingling in her voice. "Yes," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. "And you are exactly who I have been looking for." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Neither fully understood them, but both felt the truth behind the sentence. In that instant, the festival, the city, and the crowd faded into the background. There was only them, bound by fate, power, and an unspoken connection that neither could ignore. Cliffhanger. As fireworks lit the sky, the faint glow around Leora's hands flared, responding to an unseen force. From the shadows, a dark presence stirred, an ancient power tied to the kingdom, watching her, waiting. The Alpha King's protective stance did not falter, but a flicker of unease crossed his face. He knew that the night had only begun, and that danger far greater than any noble or thief was about to find them both. The palace was quiet after the Festival of Masks. Lanterns flickered along the marble halls, casting long, wavering shadows across the walls. Though the city still buzzed with music and celebration inside the palace, a different tension hung in the air, one of secrets, destiny, and whispered power. Leora walked cautiously through the hallways, guided by the Alpha King. Even without the festival masks, his presence was commanding, a force that seemed to shape the very air around him. She tried not to stare, but it was impossible to ignore him. The way his shoulders moved with effortless strength, the sharp intensity in his eyes, and the quiet authority that radiated even in the soft glow of the palace lanterns. "Why are you bringing me here?" she asked, her voice steady, though curiosity and a hint of fear laced it. "To speak in private," the king replied, his tone low and calm, "and to ensure you understand the truth of your importance." They entered a secluded chamber, a room lined with ancient tapestries and glowing crystals that pulsed faintly with magic. It was a place few had seen, reserved for the king's most private affairs. Leora felt a strange shiver as she looked around. The air seemed alive, humming softly as if acknowledging her presence. The king gestured for her to sit on a carved wooden bench. He stood before her, eyes never leaving hers. The room was silent, but the weight of unspoken words pressed down like a heavy mantle. "You carry a spark," he began, his voice almost a whisper. "Something rare, something old. It is connected to the bloodline of this kingdom, and it is why you are here, why you survived the dangers of the gate and the festival." Leora's eyes widened. I do not understand. I am just a traveler. I do not belong here." The king shook his head slowly. "You belong more than you know. There is a power within you, one that has been dormant, waiting, and tonight that power awoke. I saw it, felt it. You are tied to the fate of Valeth, to its protection, and to me." Leora struggled to comprehend his words. Magic, destiny, a connection to the king? It all felt unreal, yet the intensity in his gaze left no doubt that he believed it. "Why me?" she asked quietly. "There are so many people in this kingdom. Why would fate choose me?" The king stepped closer, his cloak brushing softly against the floor. Because you have strength, courage, and a heart that cannot be broken by fear. That is rare. That is why I have marked you." Before she could react, the king reached into a small satchel at his side. From it he drew a delicate crystal, glowing faintly with a silvery light. He held it over her palm, and instantly warmth spread through her hand. The glow seeped into her skin, leaving a faint, intricate symbol across her wrist, an emblem of the kingdom. Entwined with delicate runes she did not recognize, the mark pulsed faintly, alive as though it had its own heartbeat. Leora gasped, both from the shock of the magic and the intimate nature of the gesture. "What? What is this?" she whispered. "A mark of destiny," the king said softly. "It binds you to the kingdom's fate and to mine. It is not a chain, it is a promise, protection, and power. It will guide you when danger comes and awaken abilities you do not yet know you possess." Leora stared at the glowing mark, feeling both fear and a strange exhilaration. She had never believed in magic or destiny, yet the warmth in her palm and the intensity in the king's eyes made disbelief impossible. I don't know if I can accept this," she admitted. "It's too much." The king knelt slightly so their eyes were level. "I do not ask for your acceptance. Fate does not ask permission, but I will stand by you, guide you, and protect you. You will not face this alone." There was a weight in his words that left her breathless. It was not simply authority, it was care, protection, and a promise forged not by law or title, but by choice. Leora felt a flicker of trust, fragile yet undeniable. The quiet was broken by a sudden noise from the palace windows. A ripple of wind carried the faint sound of chanting from below, strange and rhythmic like a spell. The king's expression darkened. "They know," he said, his voice low, sharp. "The enemies of the kingdom, the ones who would see it fall, are aware of your presence and your power. They will not rest." Leora's heart raced. "Enemies? Here, now?" The king nodded. "Yes, and their reach is long. You must be ready." Over the next few days, the king began training Leora in secret. They met in hidden chambers and moonlit courtyards, practicing agility, focus, and understanding the subtle pull of the magic within her. He did not coddle her, nor did he treat her as merely a student. He treated her as an equal, a warrior in her own right, capable and determined. Though the lessons were rigorous, Leora found herself drawn to the king, not just for his strength, but for the rare glimpses of vulnerability she saw in him. He was a ruler feared by all, yet in her presence he allowed a gentleness few ever witnessed. As the days passed, whispers of intrigue reached the palace. The nobles who had tried to approach Leora during the festival had not forgotten her. They plotted, maneuvered, and schemed, seeking to exploit the girl and the magic she carried. And lurking among the shadows were darker forces, ancient entities tied to the kingdom's history, waiting for the right moment to strike. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and cast the city in a burnished gold, the king led Leora to the palace balcony. From there the city stretched endlessly, lanterns twinkling like distant stars, the streets alive with movement and life. "You see this?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with intensity. "Every light, every shadow. It is connected. Every choice we make shapes the kingdom. And you, Leora, are now part of it. Every step you take, every action will ripple through these streets and through the hearts of the people." Leora swallowed, the weight of responsibility pressing on her. "I don't even know if I'm ready." "You will be," the king said softly, "because you have no choice. And because in time you will see what I have seen, the fire inside you, the courage that cannot be extinguished. You are more powerful than you realize." A sudden shiver ran down Leora's spine. Something stirred in the air, unseen but felt, an ominous presence brushing against the walls of the palace. She glanced toward the shadows, instinctively drawing a deep breath. "Something is coming," the king murmured, his eyes narrowing. "It is close and it is dangerous. You must be ready, Leora. Trust yourself, and trust me." Before she could respond, the wind shifted, carrying a faint whisper, almost like a voice. It was distant yet insistent, calling her name in a tone both beautiful and terrifying. Leora's heart pounded as the glow of the mark on her wrist pulsed in response. She could feel the power within her stirring, awakening to meet the challenge, yet she did not understand it fully. The king stepped closer, his presence steady and unwavering. "Do not fear it," he said. "This is the beginning. Whatever comes next, we will face it together. But you must learn quickly, time is not on our side." The night deepened and shadows gathered along the walls. Leora felt a mixture of fear, excitement, and awe. Her life, once ordinary and simple, had shifted irreversibly. The mark glowed faintly, a tether between her and the king, between her and the destiny she had yet to comprehend. And then, from the darkness beyond the palace walls, a figure emerged, a figure cloaked in black, moving silently, eyes glinting with intent. The king's hand instinctively moved to the hilt of his sword, his stance ready, but he did not step forward. Instead, he allowed Leora to feel the tension, to recognize the danger, and to awaken the courage within herself. "Show me what you can do," he said softly, not as a command, but as a challenge. Leora's fingers tightened around the strap of her satchel, and the mark on her wrist flared brightly. The magic within her responded, a subtle hum of power weaving through her veins. She felt it for the first time, not as a stranger, not as a gift, but as a part of her, as if it had always belonged there. The cloaked figure advanced, moving with precision and deadly intent. Leora stepped forward unafraid, her stance steady. For the first time, she understood what the king had meant. This was not just about survival. It was about awakening, claiming her power, and standing as her own force in a world that would not bend easily. The king watched silently, his expression unreadable but his heart pounding. Whatever came next, he knew the girl before him would change everything, not only for herself, but for the kingdom, and for him. Cliffhanger. The cloaked figure lunged from the shadows, and Leora raised her hand instinctively. The magic of the mark flared brilliantly, illuminating the balcony in a silver light. The king stepped beside her, ready to fight, but the real test was not his, it was hers. As the first strike of the attacker landed, Leora realized that her life, her power, and her destiny had all been transformed in a single moment, and that the battle for the kingdom had truly begun. The castle of Valeth lay under a pale silver moon, its towers casting long shadows across the courtyard. The night was quiet, but the air was thick with tension. Leora had spent the day learning to control the power that now flowed through her, guided by the Alpha King. Each lesson left her exhausted yet alive, as though the magic itself demanded both focus and courage. The king watched her from the edge of the training hall, his dark eyes reflecting both pride and concern. He had never seen anyone adapt so quickly, yet he could not ignore the dangers surrounding them. The mark on her wrist pulsed faintly, a reminder that her connection to the kingdom and to him was deeper than either fully understood. "You are improving," the king said quietly. "Faster than I expected." Leora wiped the sweat from her brow, breathing heavily. "I don't know if I'm ready for all of this. I feel different. Stronger, yes, but also afraid." The king approached, his shadow falling over her. "Fear is natural. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is moving forward despite it. You have already shown more courage than most warriors I have commanded." Her eyes met his, and for a brief moment the lessons, the palace, and the magic faded. There was something in his gaze that spoke not only of power, but of vulnerability, of centuries of loneliness hidden beneath the mask of authority. Leora felt a pull she did not understand, a mixture of awe, trust, and something more dangerous, something fragile. "Why are you helping me?" she asked softly. "You don't owe me anything." He hesitated, then spoke with quiet honesty. "Because you should not face this alone, and because I cannot ignore what you bring out in me." "You awakened something I thought I had lost long ago." Leora's breath caught. She had not expected such words from the man who commanded armies, who ruled kingdoms with an iron will. There was a softness beneath his strength, a humanity he rarely showed. She nodded slowly, unsure what to say, but sensing that their bond had deepened beyond the lessons and protection. But the quiet did not last. Shadows moved beyond the walls of the palace, whispers of danger brushing against the night. From the east tower, a cloaked figure observed them, its eyes glinting with intent. The rival nobles, angered by Leora's presence and her growing connection to the king, had begun to plot more openly. And lurking even farther, in the forests beyond the city, were forces older and darker than any human could face alone. The king sensed it first. He had fought wars, faced enemies, and navigated the treacherous politics of kingdoms for centuries. Yet this threat was different. It was personal, intertwined with Leora, her magic, and the fragile bond forming between them. "They watch," he murmured, "and they wait for the moment to strike. You must be ready, Leora. Trust in yourself and trust in me." Leora nodded, her hand brushing the mark on her wrist. The symbol pulsed softly as if in response to his words. She felt its warmth, its quiet strength, and a flicker of confidence she had not known before. She would not hide behind fear. She would face what came, whatever it might be. The following days were filled with lessons and training, but also with small, quiet moments of connection. They walked through the palace gardens under the moonlight, spoke in hushed tones of hopes and fears, and shared stories of lives that had shaped them. Leora learned of the king's past, of betrayals, losses, and the loneliness that came with ruling a kingdom feared by all. She saw the man behind the legend, and her heart ached at the weight he carried, and the king, in turn, learned of her courage, her resilience, and the untamed fire within her. He saw how she faced fear without flinching, how her mind sought solutions even in impossible situations. Slowly, he began to trust not only her power, but her judgment, her instincts, and her spirit. One evening, as they walked along the palace balcony, the city stretched below them like a sea of lights. Lanterns glimmered in the streets, and the faint sound of music drifted up from distant celebrations. The king's gaze was fixed on the horizon, but his hand brushed against hers, a subtle, silent gesture. "You have changed me," he said softly.
"Not in ways you can see, but in ways that matter."
"I thought I had lost the ability to feel, to hope. You have restored both." Leora's heart fluttered, a mix of fear and wonder. She had not expected such honesty, such vulnerability from the Alpha King. She squeezed his hand lightly, a silent acknowledgement of trust, of shared understanding, but danger never rested. That night, the cloaked figure from the forest approached the palace walls, unseen by most but sensed by the king. With quiet precision, it moved through the shadows, its intentions deadly. Leora, sensing a disturbance, turned toward the sound, her magic flaring instinctively. The king stepped in front of her, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. "Stay calm," he said. "Do not act without thought. Let me guide you." The figure struck suddenly, a shadowy wave of force moving toward them. Leora's mark pulsed brightly, a shield of silver light forming around her. The attack was deflected, but the danger was clear. The enemies were no longer mere nobles or thieves. They were stronger, more cunning, and aware of the girl's potential. The king's eyes narrowed. "They will not stop until they claim you, or destroy us both. We must act, and quickly." Over the following days, the palace became a web of secrecy and preparation. Leora trained tirelessly, mastering the control of her magic, learning to anticipate danger and honing the instincts that had kept her alive in the streets of Velith. The king remained at her side, a silent protector, teacher, and companion. Their bond deepened, not through words, but through shared experiences, mutual trust, and the unspoken understanding that each depended on the other. Yet as they grew stronger together, so did the enemy. The rival nobles, frustrated by their failures, sought alliances with ancient powers beyond the kingdom, entities bound by curses and old grudges, whose loyalty could be bought with ambition and cruelty. Leora's presence, her power, and the mark made her the focal point of these dark ambitions. One night, as the moon rose high and the city slept, a whisper of magic reached Leora. It was a call, faint but insistent, carrying with it the weight of history and prophecy. She felt it deep within her chest, the pull of something greater than herself. The king sensed it too, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword instinctively. "It is time," he said softly. "Whatever this is, we must face it together." They moved through the castle quietly, avoiding guards and servants toward the source of the disturbance, a chamber forgotten by time, where the air was thick with ancient power. Leora's mark glowed, guiding her steps as if it had a will of its own. The king remained close, his presence a steady reassurance in the darkness. Inside the chamber, the air shimmered with energy. Shadows moved across the walls, forming shapes that were neither fully human nor fully creature. The king stepped forward, his voice firm. "Show yourself. Whatever force seeks her, you will not take her without challenge." From the shadows, a figure emerged, an ancient being, tall and imposing, with eyes like molten silver. It spoke, its voice a whisper that carried through the room like a chill wind. "The girl bears the mark that binds the kingdom. She is yours to guide, or to lose." Leora's heart raced, but she stood tall, feeling the power within her respond. The king placed a hand on her shoulder. "You are stronger than you think. Trust yourself. The figure's eyes met hers, and for the first time, Leora felt fully the weight of her destiny. The magic pulsed through her, responding to her courage, her determination, and her willingness to face what lay ahead. She raised her hands, and the mark flared with silver light, pushing back the shadows that sought to intimidate her. The king watched silently, pride and awe mingling in his gaze. The girl who had walked alone through the gates of Velith was now standing as a force in her own right, bound to the kingdom, to magic, and to him in ways that neither fully understood, yet both felt profoundly. Cliffhanger. As the chamber trembled with power, the ancient figure spoke once more. The darkness rises, and the fate of the kingdom rests in her hands. And yours, Alpha King. But know this, the shadows do not act alone. Even the closest allies may betray, and the bond you share may be tested like never before. Outside, the wind howled through the palace towers, carrying a sense of warning. Leora's mark glowed brightly, and the king's hand remained on her shoulder, a silent vow of protection and shared destiny. The true battle, for the kingdom, for their lives, and for the bond between them, was only just beginning. The city of Velith held its breath beneath a sky painted in bruised purples and deep blues. The palace towers glimmered in the dying light of dusk, but the calm was deceptive. Within the castle walls, Leora and the Alpha King prepared for the confrontation they had long known would come. Every step they took carried the weight of destiny. Every breath echoed with the unspoken promise that neither would face the coming storm alone. The chamber where Leora had first awakened her power was now their war room. Candles flickered across the walls, casting shadows that danced like silent watchers. Leora's mark pulsed steadily on her wrist, bright silver in the dim light, a beacon of the magic that had grown with her courage. The king stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his sword. His presence was a shield, steady and unwavering, yet there was a flicker in his eyes, a mixture of concern, admiration, and something deeper he had not allowed himself to feel for centuries. "They will come tonight," he said softly, his voice carrying both authority and care. "The nobles, their allies, and the ancient forces that seek to claim you. But together we can stop them." Leora nodded, her fingers brushing the glowing mark. She had learned so much in the past days, how to control the surge of magic, how to anticipate danger, and how to move with purpose even when fear threatened to overwhelm her. Yet even with her growing power, she felt the weight of what was coming. "I am ready," she said, her voice steady, though her heart raced. "We cannot let them take the kingdom, or each other." The king's gaze softened, and for a moment the distance between ruler and warrior, mentor and student dissolved. "Then let us face what comes together." As night fell, the palace seemed to pulse with anticipation. The streets below were empty, the citizens warned to remain indoors. Only the wind whispered through the towers, carrying a sense of foreboding. Suddenly, from the shadows beyond the outer walls, the first strike came, a wave of cloaked figures moving with precision, their eyes glowing faintly with malicious intent. Leora's mark flared in response, a silver shield of light forming around her. The king drew his sword, and together they met the attackers at the palace gates. The clash was swift and intense. The attackers moved like shadows, striking with lethal precision, but Leora and the king fought in perfect harmony. She unleashed her magic, the mark glowing brighter with each pulse, deflecting attacks and pushing back the darkness. The king moved with calculated power, every strike precise, every motion protective of her and the kingdom. Amid the chaos, Leora felt the presence of the ancient figure, the one who had appeared in the chamber days before. It moved unseen, powerful, and deliberate. Her heart pounded, but the king's steady presence beside her reminded her that she was not alone. "You are stronger than they expected," the king murmured, deflecting a strike that would have taken her by surprise. "Do not doubt yourself. Trust in the power within you." Leora's hands glowed, the mark responding to his words, and she realized the truth. The magic was not only hers. It was a connection, a bond between her and the king, forged by trust, courage, and shared destiny. Together they could channel its full strength. The ancient figure finally stepped into view, a towering presence cloaked in black, eyes like molten silver. It moved with a calm authority, as if certain of its victory. "You bear the mark," it said, voice echoing through the courtyard. But power alone does not define fate. Courage, unity, and choice. These will be tested tonight. The king stepped forward, placing himself between Leora and the figure. You will not harm her, he said firmly. She is the future of this kingdom, and I will not allow it. The figure's gaze shifted to Leora, and she felt the weight of its stare as if it pierced her very soul. Fear threatened to rise, but she steadied herself, feeling the mark pulse with reassurance. She was no longer the girl who had arrived at the city gates. She was a force in her own right. I am ready, she said, her voice steady. I will not run. I will not hide. The figure's shadowed form shifted, and suddenly, multiple figures emerged from the darkness. Nobles, mercenaries, and ancient beings bound by old grudges. The courtyard became a battlefield of steel and magic, the night alive with the clash of forces. Leora and the king moved as one. She released pulses of energy, deflecting attacks and creating shields of light that protected them both. The king fought with unmatched precision, guiding her, supporting her, and trusting her instincts. Amid the battle, Leora realized the deepest truth. Her power was not just magic. It was courage, compassion, and determination fused with the trust and bond she shared with the king. Each pulse of the mark was amplified by their connection, their shared will, and the knowledge that they would not falter together. As the tide of battle shifted, the ancient figure lunged at them directly. Leora felt the fear rise, but the king's hand found hers, grounding her, anchoring her in the present. Together, he said, eyes locked on hers. Their magic and strength converged. Light flared from the mark, silver and blinding, enveloping them and pushing the darkness back. The figure screamed, retreating under the combined force, its power unable to withstand the bond they shared. One by one, the remaining attackers fell, defeated or fleeing into the night. When silence returned, the courtyard was littered with remnants of battle, fallen weapons, shattered masks, and the faint hum of dissipating magic. Leora's mark glowed softly, fading to a gentle pulse while the king lowered his sword, his chest heaving with the exertion of battle. Leora turned to him, her eyes wide with awe. We did it, she whispered, still breathless from the intensity of the fight. The king nodded, his expression softening, a rare smile touching his lips. Yes, together. They stood in the quiet night, the city around them safe, but the weight of what had happened lingered. Leora realized that the battle was more than physical. It was a test of trust, courage, and their bond. And in that realization, something deeper shifted between them. The king stepped closer, his hand brushing against hers. You are extraordinary, he said softly, his voice carrying a warmth rarely heard. Not because of magic, not because of destiny, but because of who you are. Courageous, steadfast, and unafraid to stand for what matters. Leora felt her heart race, the words echoing in her chest. She had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty, and emerged not just alive, but stronger. She met his gaze, and in that moment understood that their bond had changed them both. You saved me, she said quietly, but I think we saved each other. The king's smile deepened, eyes softening with a rare vulnerability. Perhaps we did. And perhaps this is only the beginning. But tonight we have proven that together we can face anything. For the first time, Leora felt truly seen, not just as the girl who had wandered into the city, but as a force in her own right, bound by destiny, magic, and the unspoken connection she shared with the Alpha King. She realized that her journey was far from over, but with him by her side, she would face the challenges to come with courage and conviction. They stood together on the balcony. The city of Valeth sprawled below them, peaceful for now. The mark on Leora's wrist pulsed gently, a reminder of power, destiny, and the bond that had carried them through darkness and danger. The king's hand found hers once more, a silent vow of protection, trust, and partnership. In the quiet night, under a sky filled with stars, they did not speak. Words were unnecessary. The battles, the trials, and the magic had forged a connection deeper than speech. They had faced darkness and emerged together, stronger, bound not just by destiny, but by choice. The night whispered promises of new challenges, of future trials, and of a kingdom that would always need courage, wisdom, and unwavering hearts. And as they stood side by side, the Alpha King and the girl marked by destiny, they both understood one unshakable truth. Together, they were unstoppable. And so, under the silver moon and the quiet stars, A new chapter began, not just for the kingdom but for them, bound by fate, courage, and an unbreakable bond that no shadow, no enemy could ever sever. End.